There are stories that history records, and then there are those it whispers, tales that echo not through textbooks, but through rumors, half-forgotten accounts, and the uneasy silence that follows when no one dares to explain. Somewhere out there, in a lonely place tied forever to tragedy and unanswered questions, a mystery lingers. It might be the strange disappearance of a single person whose last steps make no sense, or perhaps a location, ordinary at first glance, yet steeped in tales of whispers, sightings, or strange patterns no science has managed to unravel. These are the kinds of mysteries that dig beneath the skin, the kind that leaves you wondering, what really happened here? Why has no one been able to solve it? And most chilling of all, could the same fate touch us too?
Chapter 1. The mystery begins. Every mystery has an origin, a single spark that ignites decades, sometimes centuries, of speculation. For place/person, that spark begins with an event so strange, so unnerving, that it refuses to stay buried in the past. People still whisper about it in hushed tones, reluctant to speak too loudly, as if mentioning it might awaken something best left undisturbed. The story starts with an ordinary day. Nothing unusual, no warning signs. Yet by nightfall, everything had changed. The world would later try to explain what happened here, but the first reports were clear. This was no ordinary disappearance, no simple accident. What unfolded was a puzzle missing half its pieces, a story with holes large enough for entire worlds of speculation to slip through. From the very first moment, the case drew attention. Locals couldn't stop talking about it. Newspapers latched onto it, and experts from every field weighed in with theories. But the deeper people dug, the stranger it became. Each new detail didn't bring clarity. It only raised more questions. Why here? Why then? And why has no one, after all this time, been able to explain it? This is where our journey begins. Not with answers, but with a question so haunting it refuses to fade. What really happened to place/person? Chapter 2. The final day. To understand the weight of this mystery, we have to step into the shoes of that last known day. Picture it. The sun rises like any other morning, casting the same light over the same familiar streets, fields, or corridors. On the surface, nothing seems unusual. People go about their routines, unaware that history is quietly preparing to take a sharp, unexplainable turn. Accounts from witnesses paint a curious picture. Some remember strange moods in the air, an unusual silence, a tension that couldn't quite be named. Others claim everything seemed completely normal, right up until the moment it wasn't. These conflicting testimonies only deepen the fog around what happened next. It's in these final recorded hours that the first cracks in the story appear. A forgotten letter, a missing entry in a logbook, an object placed somewhere it shouldn't have been. Small details, maybe, but the kind of details that in hindsight feel like breadcrumbs leading to something darker. And then, silence. No witnesses. No definitive moment we can point to. Just a sudden gap in the timeline where life should have continued, but didn't. This day becomes the anchor for every theory that follows. Because if we can't explain the last normal moment, how can we ever solve what came after? Chapter 3. The Vanishing Point. Every unsolved mystery has a moment when reality itself seems to fracture. For place/person, that fracture lies in the vanishing point, the precise instant when presence became absence. Imagine tracing the timeline minute by minute. One moment, all is normal. The next, there's a hole in the story, as if someone ripped a page out of the book of history. No screams, no signs of struggle, no obvious trace of departure. Just nothing. This is what unsettles investigators most. The lack of transition. People don't simply vanish into thin air, or at least they shouldn't. And yet, here, that's exactly what seems to have happened. Search teams scoured every corner, combing through landscapes, buildings, even underground passages. Dogs picked up no trail. Equipment detected nothing unusual. It was as if the person or place had slipped through an invisible crack in the world. The vanishing point has since become a symbol, the epicenter of speculation. Some say it's where the supernatural intervened. Others insist it's the result of human deception, carefully hidden. But the truth remains maddeningly out of reach. Standing at this exact spot today, people still report chills, an unshakable sense of being watched, or the uncanny feeling that reality here is somehow thinner. It's not just a mystery, it's a wound in time. Chapter 4. The First Investigation. When the disappearance was first reported, it sparked immediate action. Local authorities rushed to the scene, eager to make sense of what had happened. Their goal was simple: gather evidence, follow the trail, and piece together a logical explanation. But what they found only made the case stranger. Investigators documented the scene with meticulous detail. Every footprint, every scrap of paper, every disturbed object was recorded. Yet nothing pointed to a struggle. No broken locks, no forced entry, no obvious signs of escape. It was as though the world had neatly erased the missing figure or figures without leaving fingerprints behind. Neighbors and witnesses were questioned. Some swore they saw strange lights the night before. Others remembered hearing noises that didn't belong, low hums, metallic clinks, or sudden silences too sharp to ignore. But none of these accounts aligned into a coherent story. As days passed, frustration mounted. The more the investigators searched, the more the case defied explanation. Files grew thicker with speculation, but thinner with facts. Eventually, the official line wavered between two uneasy options: a carefully planned disappearance or something beyond comprehension. That first investigation should have brought clarity. Instead, it cemented the mystery, leaving everyone with the chilling realization that some answers might never be found. Chapter 5. Whispers among locals. Long after the official search quieted, the story lived on in whispers. In small towns and close-knit neighborhoods, people share secrets the way they share bread, quietly, cautiously, and often at night. And when it came to place/person, the rumors spread like wildfire. Some locals claimed they'd seen shadows moving in places no one should have been. Others swore they heard voices echoing in the stillness, calling out names in tones that didn't sound quite human. A few even admitted, reluctantly, that they avoided the area altogether. They said the air felt wrong there, heavy, charged like the seconds before a thunderstorm. With each retelling, the mystery grew stranger. A forgotten tale of curses resurfaced. Old folk legends were pulled into the mix, as if the past itself was demanding to be remembered. Children were warned not to wander too close. Farmers crossed themselves when passing by. To outsiders, these stories sounded like superstition, the kind of folklore that naturally blooms around tragedy. But for the people living closest, the whispers weren't just stories, they were warnings. And that raises a question we can't easily dismiss. Were these tales merely the human need to explain the unexplainable, or did the locals sense something the rest of us could not? Chapter 6. Theories take shape. When facts fail, theories rush in to fill the void. Almost immediately after the disappearance, speculation spread far beyond the town. Newspapers churned out headlines, radio hosts debated endlessly, and self-proclaimed experts weighed in with their explanations. Some leaned on the rational. Perhaps it was a case of foul play, carefully hidden. A crime so clever that even seasoned investigators missed the signs. Others proposed more ordinary scenarios. People fleeing debts, scandals, or personal troubles. Disappearances, after all, are not unheard of. But then came the stranger theories. Some insisted the missing had stumbled into a natural anomaly. An underground cave system, a sinkhole, or even a pocket of toxic gas that left no survivors. A few voices dared to go further, whispering about parallel dimensions, abductions, or portals hidden in plain sight. The range of possibilities created a strange tension. On one hand, logical explanations kept the case tethered to reality. On the other, the sheer absence of evidence made the extraordinary seem almost reasonable. Each theory reflected more than just a guess. It reflected people's fears, hopes, and beliefs about the world itself. Was this a human mystery, or something that challenged our very understanding of reality? One thing became clear. The theories didn't solve the puzzle. They only made it deeper. Chapter 7. The Stranger Sightings. Not long after the disappearance, reports began to surface. Sightings that seemed too bizarre to ignore, yet too inconsistent to confirm. People claimed they saw fleeting figures at the edge of the woods, or strange lights hovering where no lights should be. Others described shadows moving against the flow of daylight, bending in ways shadows aren't supposed to move. One traveler passing through swore he glimpsed the missing individual, or someone uncannily like them, standing silently on a distant road, staring blankly before fading into the night air. Another claimed to hear footsteps pacing just outside their window, but when they opened the door, the ground was untouched. Patterns started to form. The sightings almost always came at twilight, in liminal spaces, roads that led nowhere, abandoned houses, or quiet fields where the world already felt thin. And although skeptics dismissed these as tricks of fear and imagination, the sheer number of accounts forced even hardened doubters to pause. Were these echoes of the missing? Hallucinations born of obsession? Or something stranger still? Residual traces of a story unfinished? Sightings never gave solid answers. Instead, they blurred the line between fact and folklore, leaving locals and investigators with an uneasy thought. Perhaps the disappearance hadn't ended at all. Perhaps it was still unfolding. Chapter 8. Evidence that doesn't belong. As investigators dug deeper, they stumbled across details that didn't quite fit. Little fragments of evidence that seemed almost planted, out of place, or belonging to a reality just slightly askew from our own. Objects turned up where they shouldn't have been. A shoe sitting miles from the search radius, perfectly clean, as if it had never touched soil. A set of fingerprints that matched no one in the records. Scrawled symbols on a wall that none of the locals could explain, though they looked eerily familiar to a handful of researchers. Even more unsettling were the reports of time-stamped entries that made no sense. Logs written after the supposed disappearance. Items signed out or checked in by people who should no longer have been there. Each piece of evidence sparked debate. Were these simply mistakes, clerical errors, or coincidences? Or were they the smoking gun, proof that something far stranger had taken place? The problem wasn't the lack of evidence. It was the wrongness of it. Every clue seemed to point in a different direction, creating a puzzle where the pieces didn't belong to the same box. And the deeper investigators looked, the more they began to wonder, was this evidence leading them toward the truth or deliberately leading them away from it? Chapter 9. The Outside Experts. When local authorities hit a wall, they called in outsiders, experts from far beyond the town's borders. Scientists, historians, criminologists, even psychologists were invited to analyze what the locals couldn't explain. Their arrival brought a wave of anticipation. Surely, with advanced tools and sharper minds, someone would finally untangle the knots of the mystery. But the experts didn't agree with one another. The scientists studied the terrain, ruling out natural disasters, yet unable to explain the missing footprints, the strange readings, or the abnormal silence in certain areas. Historians suggested the place carried echoes of older tragedies, woven into its soil like scars that never healed. Psychologists, meanwhile, leaned toward mass hysteria, arguing that fear itself can create visions, false memories, even shared delusions. Still, none of these perspectives erased the anomalies. The evidence remained stubborn, refusing to fit neatly into any single theory. And if anything, the competing explanations only made the mystery feel bigger, not smaller. The presence of outsiders also stirred tension. Locals accused them of ignoring lived experiences. Experts accused townsfolk of feeding superstition. Yet beneath the debates was a strange unity. Everyone admitted that something unusual was happening, something that didn't play by ordinary rules. And so, instead of answers, the experts left behind a trail of unanswered questions and a growing sense that the mystery was larger than anyone imagined. Chapter 10. A Haunting Pattern. As the years passed, researchers and storytellers began to notice something chilling. This mystery wasn't standing alone. Similar cases, strange vanishings, unexplained silences, evidence that bent logic, had cropped up elsewhere, separated by decades, even centuries. At first, the connections seemed tenuous. A vanished colony here, a missing hiker there, a town abandoned overnight on the far side of the world. But when the details were placed side by side, eerie parallels emerged. Objects left neatly behind. Last entries in journals that stopped mid-sentence. Survivors who described feelings of dread or of being pulled somewhere unseen. Some began mapping these incidents, tracing them across history like constellations. And to their astonishment, patterns appeared. Clusters of vanishings seemed to follow certain geographies, remote forests, coastal outposts, regions heavy with folklore. Others seemed tied to dates or lunar cycles, as though time itself were somehow complicit. The idea of a pattern unsettled everyone. A single mystery might be explained away as accident or crime, but a recurring pattern across centuries? That suggested something far stranger, something systematic. Was it the hand of nature, repeating itself with uncanny precision? Or was it evidence of something intelligent, something that has been with us all along, working in the shadows, leaving behind its signature again and again? Chapter 11. The Vanishing Witness. Every mystery has its witnesses, those rare individuals who claim to have seen more than the rest. But in this case, one witness stood out. They insisted they had glimpsed the truth in those final moments before the disappearance. Something so extraordinary that it defied belief. At first, their account was dismissed as imagination. They spoke of a sudden shift in the air, of colors bending in unnatural ways, of shapes moving where there should have been none. Their description didn't fit within the boundaries of reason, and so it was set aside. But then, something even stranger happened. The witness themselves disappeared. Not in the dramatic mid-sentence kind of way, at least not at first. They simply stopped showing up to interviews. Friends couldn't find them. Their home was left untouched, as though they had stepped out for a moment and never returned. This vanishing of the witness sent ripples through the case. Were they silenced because they knew too much? Did fear drive them into hiding? Or had they become another victim of the very force they tried to describe? Whatever the reason, their absence left the case with one less voice, one less chance at clarity. And it added a cruel twist to the mystery. The one person who might have held the key had vanished into the same darkness. Chapter 12. Messages from Nowhere. Just when it seemed the case had gone cold, something deeply unsettling surfaced. Messages. Letters, recordings, even scribbled notes began to appear. Sometimes in mailboxes, sometimes tucked under doors, and sometimes in places no one could explain. The content was even stranger. Some messages repeated phrases the missing had once said, word for word, as if echoing across time. Others contained cryptic warnings, "Don't look here," or "It watches when you sleep." A few included coordinates or directions that, when followed, led investigators to dead ends. Empty clearings, abandoned structures, or nothing at all. Even more chilling were the formats. Handwriting matched the missing, yet paper and ink were dated years later. Recordings contained familiar voices, but with distortions no equipment could explain. In one instance, a note appeared inside a locked drawer that hadn't been opened in decades. Skeptics argued these were elaborate hoaxes, pranks fueled by obsession. But believers insisted they were genuine attempts at communication, echoes from wherever the missing had gone. The messages didn't solve the mystery. If anything, they complicated it, raising new questions about how information can cross boundaries we don't yet understand. Were these cries for help, warnings from another side, or proof that the line between our world and something else was thinner than we imagined? Chapter 13. The Forbidden Place. Every mystery seems to circle back to a single location, a spot locals avoid, where stories accumulate like dust. For place/person, that spot became known simply as the Forbidden Place. It wasn't marked on maps, but everyone in town knew where it was. A stretch of land shrouded in silence. A house that never quite felt empty, a patch of woods where animals refused to go. Travelers passing through dismissed it as superstition, but those who grew up nearby swore there was something wrong with the ground itself. Visitors described sudden temperature drops, compasses spinning wildly, or the uncanny feeling of being watched. Electronics failed there, batteries drained in minutes, and radios filled with static even on clear days. Some even claimed to hear faint whispers, though no one else was around. The forbidden place quickly became a focal point of the mystery. Was it the origin of the disappearance? A doorway, perhaps, to something hidden? Or was it simply where fear projected itself most strongly, creating legends out of shadows? Investigators tried to probe the area, but few stayed long. Almost all reported overwhelming unease, as if the air itself wanted them gone. To this day, locals advise outsiders to steer clear. And perhaps that's the most chilling part, because sometimes the best way to survive a mystery is not to chase it too closely. Chapter 14. Echoes in the Dark. Darkness has always been fertile ground for the imagination. But in the case of place/person, it wasn't just the absence of light that unsettled people. It was what seemed to live in it. Many reported hearing echoes in the night. Not the natural sounds of wind or wildlife, but voices, sometimes faint, like a whisper carried on the breeze. Other times louder, sharp enough to send people running indoors. The most unnerving accounts describe the voices repeating names, sometimes the names of the missing, other times the names of those listening. Audio equipment brought into the area captured anomalies too. Low-frequency hums, static bursts, and, on rare occasions, tones resembling human speech. Yet when replayed, these recordings never sounded quite the same, as though the echoes shifted depending on who was listening. Skeptics chalked it up to pareidolia, the human brain finding patterns where none exist. But those who experienced it firsthand swore it was something more deliberate, a presence reaching out, not by sight or touch, but through sound that seeped into the bones. The echoes never gave answers. Instead, they offered a cruel paradox, proof that something was there, yet no clue as to what. And for many, that was worse than silence, because silence can be ignored. But a voice in the dark, that demands attention. Chapter 15. The Unfinished Journal. Among the strangest artifacts tied to the case was a journal, one belonging to the missing. At first glance, it seemed ordinary, filled with day-to-day notes, sketches, and scattered reflections. But the closer investigators looked, the more unsettling it became. Entries hinted at unease in the days leading up to the disappearance. Mentions of being followed, drawings of eyes, circles, and doors that led nowhere. One page contained the words, "It's closer now. I hear it at night." Another, scrawled hastily, warned, "Don't let them take me." And then, the writing stopped, mid-sentence. No conclusion, no final thought, just an unfinished line trailing into empty space, as if the author had been interrupted in the act of writing. The journal's authenticity was verified, the handwriting matched, and the ink aged correctly. But that only made it more disturbing. It wasn't a forgery. It was a direct window into a mind spiraling toward something no one else seemed to notice. Some argued the entries revealed paranoia, proof of a mind unraveling. Others believed the journal was evidence of awareness, that the missing had sensed what was coming and tried, unsuccessfully, to leave behind a warning. Whatever the truth, the journal gave no closure. Only more questions. Questions that now seemed to whisper from the half-finished pages, daring anyone brave enough to keep reading. Chapter 16. The Phantom Sounds. Before the disappearance, some locals recalled an unsettling detail, sounds that had no source. They called them the phantoms. These weren't the ordinary creaks of an old building or the rustling of animals in the brush. The sounds were distinct, deliberate. Footsteps pacing on empty floors, knocks echoing on walls no one touched, and low humming that seemed to vibrate through the air without direction. One farmer swore he heard heavy boots circling his house at night. When he flung the door open, nothing was there, but the sound continued, circling closer, until it stopped dead at his feet. Another account described music, faint, haunting, almost like a lullaby, that vanished the moment anyone tried to record it. For investigators, the phantom sounds posed a maddening problem. They could be dismissed as imagination, but too many people reported them for that explanation to fully hold. Some theorists suggested infrasound, low-frequency vibrations below the threshold of human hearing, known to cause unease, dread, and even hallucinations. Yet that didn't explain why recordings captured nothing, or why different people described the same patterns. Pacing footsteps, knocking threes, distant voices. The phantom sounds linger as one of the most disturbing threads in the mystery. Because while vanishing can be ignored, sound demands attention. And here, it was as though something unseen was trying very hard to be heard. Chapter 17, The Lost Photograph. Sometimes, the smallest artifact can feel like the loudest clue. For this mystery, that artifact was a single photograph. It wasn't discovered until years later, tucked inside an old album that had been stored away in a relative's attic. At first, it looked ordinary. A gathering, smiling faces, the kind of picture you'd expect to find in a family collection. But there, in the background, something caught the eye. Behind the group stood a figure. Tall, blurred, and slightly distorted, as though the camera lens had resisted capturing it. No one present that day remembered anyone standing there. And when compared with other photos from the same event, the figure was absent. Only this one frame contained it. What made it more unnerving was the resemblance. Some swore the figure's outline matched the missing person. Others argued it was something else entirely, a presence not meant to be seen. The photograph was tested for tampering, but the results came back clean. No edits, no tricks, just film and light. The lost photograph became an obsession for many. Was it proof the missing lingered after their disappearance? Or evidence of an intruder, something that had been watching all along? To this day, the picture circulates among researchers and storytellers. And every time it surfaces, one question echoes louder than the rest. Who, or what, was caught in that frame? Chapter 18, The Midnight Return. Years after the disappearance, just when the story had begun to fade into myth, something happened that reignited the fire. The midnight return. It was a quiet night when locals reported seeing lights moving through the abandoned property tied to the case. Not lanterns, not flashlights, glowing orbs drifting silently through the rooms. Some swore they also saw a figure pacing behind the cracked windows, pausing every so often as if staring out. One witness, a neighbor, claimed she heard the front door slam shut at exactly midnight, though no one had been inside for years. Another insisted he saw the missing person themselves, standing at the edge of the yard, motionless, before dissolving into the shadows. Authorities searched, of course. They found nothing. No footprints, no broken locks, no evidence of entry. Yet multiple reports matched in eerie detail, all describing the same night, the same hour, the same inexplicable activity. The midnight return left people divided. Was it the spirit of the missing, attempting to come home? Was it a trick of the imagination, fueled by legend and sleeplessness? Or was it something far stranger, an event repeating itself, as though time had folded back on itself for just one night? Whatever it was, it proved one thing. The story wasn't over. Chapter 19, The Failed Explanations. When faced with mysteries, people cling to explanations like lifelines. Psychologists blamed stress, mass hysteria, or faulty memories. Skeptics insisted locals exaggerated events for attention. Others said the so-called hauntings were simply creaky wood, faulty wiring, or reflections of passing car lights. But every explanation seemed to collapse under its own weight. Stress doesn't make multiple people describe the same glowing orbs. Faulty wiring doesn't slam doors at midnight, and memories don't align perfectly across witnesses who hadn't even spoken to one another. Then came the rationalizers. They argued the disappearance was staged, an escape, a new life somewhere else. It's a tempting answer, neat and tidy. Yet how do you explain the missing person reappearing years later in photographs, blurred at the edge of the frame, always watching but never stepping forward. Even scientific teams who came to investigate left with more questions than answers. Instruments picked up fluctuations in electromagnetic fields. Cameras malfunctioned at key moments. Some researchers even admitted, off record, that they felt watched, oppressed by an invisible presence they couldn't quantify. So the cycle continued, each tidy theory crumbling when tested against stubborn, eerie facts. And in that vacuum of certainty, imagination flourished. If science couldn't explain it, maybe something beyond science had to. The case had slipped through the fingers of reason. Chapter 20, The Haunting Legacy. Over time, the case stopped being just a story of a disappearance. It became a living shadow woven into the identity of the place itself. Generations grew up hearing warnings. Don't wander past the old house at night. Don't follow strange lights into the woods. Don't answer if you hear your name whispered when no one's around. The mystery evolved into a cultural ghost. Local art, songs, and even festivals drew from it. Children dared each other to spend a night near the property. Teenagers told the tale at bonfires, watching the flames reflect in wide, nervous eyes. And older residents, who once lived through the early days of the tragedy, kept their silence, shaking their heads whenever outsiders asked too many questions. What's striking is how the story refused to fade. Most urban legends blur, details lost over decades. But this one, it only grew sharper, reinforced by fresh reports of strange activity and chilling encounters. And so, the disappearance transformed into something larger than itself, a legacy. A reminder that not all wounds heal, not all questions have answers, and not all mysteries are meant to rest. Even today, the legend whispers through the town, shaping how people live, what they fear, and how they explain the unexplainable. Chapter 21. A twist in the tale. Just when everyone thought the mystery had settled into folklore, a discovery shook everything up. A hiker, wandering far beyond the usual trails, stumbled across something buried beneath a tangle of roots. A personal item long believed to have vanished with the missing person. It wasn't degraded, not weathered by years in the open. It looked as though it had been placed there only recently. The find reignited the entire case. How could an object disappear for decades, only to reemerge as if untouched by time? Some argued it proved the missing had returned, in secret, to leave a breadcrumb behind. Others whispered it was a sign, either of a hidden truth waiting to be uncovered, or of something that wanted to keep the mystery alive. Investigators reopened old files, retraced steps, and interviewed surviving witnesses. But every path led back to the same place. Confusion, contradiction, dead ends. The twist was almost cruel. Instead of offering closure, the discovery deepened the riddle. Was it a clue, or a trap, a fragment of truth, or another layer of illusion? The story had refused to end. And now, with this unexpected turn, it seemed destined to echo on even longer, taunting anyone who dared to seek answers. Chapter 22, The Silent Forest. If there's one place that embodies the heart of this mystery, it's the forest. Not just any patch of trees, but the dense, almost suffocating woodland that borders the old property. By day, it looks ordinary, sunlight cutting through branches, birds calling in the distance. But at night, it transforms into something else entirely. People who've entered after dark often describe the same unnerving sensation. Silence. Not the natural hush of nighttime, but an unnatural stillness, as if the forest itself is holding its breath. No owls, no insects, no rustling leaves, just an oppressive quiet that presses against the skin. Some say they've seen figures darting between trees, glimpsed only for a heartbeat before dissolving into shadows. Others recall hearing footsteps pacing just behind them, though no one was there when they turned. A few even claim the forest rearranges itself, trails shifting so that familiar paths no longer lead where they should. Locals avoid it, not because of wild animals or dangerous terrain, but because of the weight it carries. It feels alive, as if guarding secrets it doesn't want revealed. And so, The silent forest remains both setting and character in this enduring mystery, a stage where the impossible doesn't just happen, it lingers. Chapter 23. Modern Investigations. With technology advancing, you'd think mysteries like this would finally bow to reason. And for a while, that was the hope. Paranormal researchers arrived with thermal cameras, drones, and sensitive audio equipment. Teams mapped the area, scanned the forest, and recorded every creak, hum, and shadow. But what they captured only made the legend stronger. Cameras cut out without warning, memory cards corrupted, batteries drained in minutes. Drones veered off course as though pulled by an unseen hand. On one chilling night, an entire crew swore they heard whispers over their radios. Except when played back, the recordings were silent. Skeptics chalked it up to equipment failure. Believers argued it was proof of forces beyond our understanding. Either way, the forest resisted being measured, as if mocking human attempts to pin it down with data. The investigations drew worldwide attention. Documentaries were filmed, podcasts dissected every theory, and social media buzzed with grainy clips and shaky eyewitness videos. Yet, for all the coverage, the central riddle remained intact. Modern tools didn't solve the mystery, they deepened it. And perhaps that's what unsettles us most. Even in an age where satellites map the globe and science unlocks the universe, some corners of our world still refuse to give up their secrets. Chapter 24. The Unanswered Questions. After decades of searching, probing, and theorizing, one truth lingers above all else. We don't have the answers. Every theory, no matter how clever, crumbles under the weight of contradiction. Every investigation ends with more questions than it began. Was the disappearance staged? If so, why would the missing person resurface in fleeting glimpses years later? Was it paranormal? Then why did physical evidence, like the suddenly recovered personal item, appear so deliberately? Could it be something natural, a trick of perception, memory, or time itself? If so, why do so many different people describe the same chilling details with uncanny precision? The questions multiply like shadows at dusk. What happened in the forest that night? Why does silence seem to swallow sound whole? Why do doors slam at midnight when no one's there? And perhaps the most haunting of all, does the missing person still walk among us, unseen, searching for something we can't understand? These unanswered questions aren't just gaps in a story. They're the very fuel that keeps the mystery alive. And maybe that's why this case refuses to die. It thrives in the space between fact and legend, between what we know and what we fear. Chapter 25. Conclusion. When mysteries refuse to die. Some mysteries fade with time. They shrink into dusty newspaper clippings, whispered only by historians and forgotten by the world. But not this one. This story endures, living in the forest, in the flicker of lights at midnight, in the memories of those who swear they saw something impossible. What makes it so haunting isn't just the disappearance itself. It's the refusal of the unknown to stay buried. Every new clue collapses into contradiction. Every explanation feels too small for the weight of the story. And so, it lingers like a wound that never heals, like a ghost that never rests. Perhaps that's the real power of this mystery. It forces us to confront how little we truly know. In a world where science can split atoms and send machines to Mars, here lies a place that refuses to be solved. It whispers to us that the universe is bigger, stranger, and far less predictable than we'd like to believe. And maybe, just maybe, that's why we keep listening, because some part of us needs mysteries. They remind us that wonder still exists, that fear still has teeth, and that even in our age of certainty, the unknown hasn't surrendered. This isn't just a haunting. It's a reminder. Some stories will never die.